Hello, this is Lisa Lee and welcome to my channel. We are continuing with the series Figuring It Out with Lisa Lee. We are working with Lilith, who's working through a story that she's telling us. If you haven't watched the previous videos, I suggest doing that because they kind of go in order. You sort of need them in order. So the point that we're at right now is we're working through Lilith's mythology and we're kind of casting a new light on it. She's kind of telling us a new story and interpretation around it. And we're just sort of listening, we're taking it in, we're letting it be a story. We're not demanding the story to be true or false. We're just listening to what she has to say and bring through about her story as she relates it. And so where we left off was, we were really just talking about systems of dominance and how we have to almost create around and through them to disempower them. And I want to talk a little bit about what it means to overcome the system of dominance as it is. And so she made this analogy about rape and possession. Possession, demon possession being the taking of the body of that life force and creative capacity of the person. And how that it exists, and that rape really exists to uphold the system of dominance as it relates to being afraid and needing something to protect you from those things that could possess you. And she made a point of highlighting this because she said, look at your world. The idea of all the monsters that we watch the movies and that we're screaming and that we're afraid, they all exist, those monsters are spiritual examples, or those monsters are examples of spiritual concepts that are more broad. And so a system of dominance really does have to occur under the paradigm of possession in order for the system of dominance to create this hierarchy. The hierarchy has to, take the life force of some and feed it into the sustenance and the comfort level and of another life, and that's possessing periods of someone's life, the energy of someone's life, the creative capacity of someone's life, in order to serve another being. And so possession is a very real thing. And so when Lilith said, I'm not going to lay beneath Adam, I'm not going to submit to dominance, she was operating in defiance to possession. And so she wants to bring, a new spin on things, because we sort of left off talking about, her interaction with the other side, and the cost of that being that 100 of her children would die every day, that her creation, what she created, would have no bearing in the system of dominance. We talked about her position as that which was in charge of helping facilitate, when a spirit comes into being, because she was considered the demon who was harmful to, it caused infant deaths in the womb, and it's because she was that which facilitated whether or not a spirit decided to be born into the ecosystem of the seen or be born into the ecosystem of the unseen. And those both are equal, and both are valuable ways of life's expansion and interaction with what it is to have consciousness and be alive. And so when death was deemed bad, naughty, and evil, her job as a facilitator for beings coming into the coming into the world of worth, deciding whether they wanted to participate in the seen or unseen world, was also sort of demonized. And there's this little thing about, male children are at risk of Lilith for 8 days and female children are at risk of Lilith for 20 days. It's a funny thing, but, she's basically saying, again, this is a story told by the victors, and the victors are basically saying female life is worth less than male life. And so that which is worth less has more danger and risk to be taken by the life and death process. It's this very strange thing that she's not wanting to focus on too much, but I'm trying to adhere to all the aspects of her story. And so when we talk about what it means to overcome this structure of oppression that we find ourselves in, it's about valuing things differently, and valuing life as being just as, she's basically saying, valuing the life that has made it into the physical realm as much as the life that went into the unseen realm, having a different orientation towards death as being a very natural part of the cycle of expansion disempowers the fear of it. And it's the fear of it that makes you seek something to protect you, so that's how you get dominated. How does a person end up dominated? How does the system of dominance persist? It's because there's something so scary that we need to protect ourselves from. And when we think that death is the end of everything, and that death is the worst horrible thing, and that we need to be saved, from death by either heaven or condemned to death with hell, that we're really having the wrong kind of relationship with death overall. And and so she says that to disempower death is also to is to disempower like dominant structures over us that threaten our lives and that threaten to hurt us. And she's like, it's real, but we want to loosen our grip around this idea that life is the only thing worth preserving in this certain kind of a way, because that's the lore and the theory and the spell that makes fear so powerful, and creates a need for us to be somehow protected from what otherwise would be a very natural experience. And so she's showing me it's to free ourselves is really to change our perspective about what holds us, and the power of what holds us, and to value our growth and our expansion pretty much more than anything else, and to not fear death. Fearing death is, she's like, the main thing. We give a lot of power away because of that fear. And that there's a liberation and understanding that the ecosystem of the unseen is just as rich and valuable, and that by undoing our perception about death and by interacting with the dead in a fearless way, that we actually end up freeing the afterlife. That this is how we bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. This is how a rapture actually exists. It basically takes the bindings off death by recasting death as actually a positive experience that can be quite beautiful in its transformative properties. This is a handful and a lot to take in, but it's she's saying it's the prayer of the dead that the living would begin to interact with them, because life is supposed to interact with death in order to facilitate this growth and this transformation. And so now we're moving into what this changed perspective ends up having to be, because she's saying that, the way that she's like, so let's have this war between the matriarchy and the patriarchy. And, she refused to lay beneath Adam. She refused to be dominated. She was cast out into the wilderness, and she was, placed into the other side where all of her creations had no place in the system of existence. And that punishment, I'm going to try to get a hold of this. Let me just a little bit. Leads to, she's like, when we stop thinking of death as being anything other than part of a story of constant life, of infinity, then we take the power that which dominates has away. And so let's get more cards, because when we think about the story of Adam and Eve, we go from a story where Lilith was created with Adam equally to a story where Adam, the patriarchy, creates Eve from Adam's body, from Adam's rib, creating this a dominance as being, a part of women. What woman is something that's from man and not its own creature in and of itself. It's the divine masculine energy saying that the divine feminine creative capacity, only comes through, the life of the life force of males. Yeah, it's really interesting. But I want to take a look at this a little bit closer, because as we expand into this message, this is a really interesting message. Lilith wants to kind of show us that, the way that she's been demonized is demonizing those things that demonizing death, basically. Demonizing female sexuality. Lilith's other role, she was made into the angel who, basically the angel of death over birth, and also the succubus, female sexuality, basically saying that female dominance, and she's saying male dominance or female dominance, it is a misuse of the creative energy. And so she's saying that the idea that she was cast as a succubus, that all of her sexual interactions from that day forward would be without, so she's saying that the succubus, the story around the succubus is that it goes to the man while he's sleeping, and it steals his seed. And it's a type of I mean, it's actually a type of rape, but ultimately, like, it's this idea that, you know, if women aren't, it's unnatural for a woman to be in any kind of power around her sexuality. But when meanwhile, Lilith is pointing out that when the desire to be desired and interacting with the desire to be desired, and even the desire to be worshipped, and that's something very interesting that has been demonized as a concept, but at the same time she's saying, you know, women as creators of life, you know, worship didn't have a power over power under connotation until this idea of like the one true dominant God over, you know, and hierarchy came in, and that being worshipped is our natural way to be loved. And if you take the power stuff out of it, you know, it's a beautiful experience. And the divine feminine, divine masculine energy is within all of us, and there's something to be said for we all deserve a level of awe, you know, and worship for like the life force that we embody and create from. And so she's saying that, you know, demonizing female sexuality and casting it into she said the idea of a succubus is sex without love or creative capacity, sex that is taking energy for misuse, and not pouring anything back into, you know, the creative process between the two, male and female energy. And she's saying that that's kind of like, yeah, let's see what she says about that, because I need cards. Let's see where Lilith wants to go with this. It's really interesting. This whole story is brilliant. Because she's saying the sister wound is related to Eve, related to women now, you know, being in two camps, the bound and the unbound. You know, that which is created of Adam, created of that system of dominance, and adhering to that system of dominance, and of the belief that the female capacity to create and divine feminine creation has to come through a male avenue of life. It's like splitting females basically into two categories, or divine feminine energies into two categories: that which is dependent on the dominance of men, and that which is independent. And so she says this is the sister wound. So the last episode we talked about the rape wound as being related to possession, and the sister wound as being related to splitting the divine feminine energy into that which is dependent on the dominance of males for creation, and that which is independent of that and operating outside of that system of dominance. And let's take a look at what that means. Whew. It's a lot. This is a really interesting, this is fascinating. It's coming through. Okay. And I'm going to straighten this in a second. I don't know if it's straight. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So female sexuality. Okay, let's do this. This is divine feminine sexuality. Let's take a look at what it is. And she's saying divine feminine sexuality is a process of receiving, and then, oh, that's really cool. Okay, let me come back to that in a second. Trying to sort of get this as straight as possible. I find channeling Lilith to be incredibly challenging. And so bear with me a little bit in terms of how I have to kind of pace myself. Okay. So this may have come through another reading, because I don't know why it seems so familiar to me, but it does. Yes. So she's showing me this thing, and she's basically saying, you know, female sexuality, when the divine feminine, and she's like, okay, for those in a divine feminine, who identify with the divine feminine energy predominantly, when you experience the intimate act, do you experience the intimate act as taking power into yourself, holding that power, and then creating life from that power? Or do you experience that act as an act of giving a gift through a position of submission? And she's saying, so when we split the divine feminine energy into two categories, one that gets its creative capacity through and with men only, and one that operates as in an independent place as that which is doing the taking the power in, holding the power, and then transforming it into new life. She's saying that when we think that And she's saying, yes, there's a role that the divine masculine energy has in creating life with the divine feminine, but it shouldn't be disempowering, and it shouldn't be a submission exchange process. And that, you know, the distortion here and the sister wound comes with this this idea that you cannot that your creative capacity is limited to what is made through the intimate act, and that it's not more universal, you know, for men and people who are born with either gender, you know, to then, you know, step into taking power and holding power and then creating from that power. It's a relationship to power where the sister wound really operates, and it has to do with like allegiance. One of the reasons it's so hard to channel Lilith is because she shows me so much at once that I get really lost with it. But when we talk about what it is to be in your sexual power, first you have to connect to the desire to be desired, because that's a very key thing, especially in relationship to worship as well. These are parts of the creative process, and connecting to the divine feminine energy is actually wanting to have a relationship with love where you are revered to a certain extent for your creative capabilities and what you're able to do by holding power and transforming into new life. She's also saying that this is hard to bring through, that this exchange, this is all the sex that we do that brings us nowhere, that is like weird pleasure that doesn't create anything from it, that does have a draining sort of succubus quality. It does have a dehumanizing quality, and it also has that this is the betrayal of the body's creative capacity when we take when we give our power away instead of experiencing the power to create with, that we're betraying ourselves and we're betraying our sisters, that we're betraying the divine feminine energy when we don't value this process of holding power and creating of that power. And that it's not just about intimacy and procreation, that it's about holding power and creating from power, that it's allowing yourself to be in that position where you are revered and worshipped as a creator, and allowing yourself to even want that it's demonized because it's related to female magic, but that there's actually nothing wrong with worship and veneration if there's no power imbalance and abuse, and, you know, connected to that. And so that what we need to do is to reconnect with our divine feminine energy, reconnect with our creative capacity and creating through power. And part of that is even wanting it. It's wanting to experience ourselves as creators that is so forbidden and so taboo. And so, you know, when you interact with your desire to be desired, that's actually plugging back into like what you really are and what you're really meant to be and do. And when you're around feminine energies who condemn you for any kind of power that you might hold, that's the sister wound. That's the comparison and the jealousy, and you can't hold that much power, and you can't have that much beauty, and you can't be strong in this position. Like, you can't create from power is really what it ends up coming down to. And so there's this idea that if you create, if you're like the Eve thing is, if you create, you're creating for men, you're creating for the system, you're creating for others. Whereas, you know, Lilith is basically saying, no, you create from power, you know, in order to bring life into the world, and that there's a love that the universe is meant to give you in response to that creative capacity that is not something that you should, you know, throw away, because that's the betrayal to that divine feminine energy of creation. And so when we see that, like, you know, when we look at the interplay between light and dark, between life and death, you know, this is something that we're supposed to do in co-collaboration with each other, that divine feminines are supposed to hold each other up, they're supposed to support each other's creativity, that they're not supposed to compare each other, you know, for the purpose of hierarchy, who's better, who meets the beauty standard better, who has a better voice, who has a better this, that. It's all related to production. Like, anytime your power is related to production, you know, for the purpose of consuming, you know, for the purpose of getting male validation, or, you know, that there's something to be said for interacting with our power in a new way. And that means wanting that power to create and have what we have created. You know, that the creation act should be worshipped and venerated, and that doesn't exclude divine masculine individuals, that they have divine feminine energy too, but that bringing power back into creation has something to do with wanting it to be received in a way that is worshipful, and that is healthy, and that is right. And to betray that for a system of hierarchy that says you should be humble, to the ends of self, she's saying sacrifice, for others, and you don't want to be perceived as beautiful, you don't want to be perceived as powerful, that there's this comparison, there's this cattiness, there's this sister wound in not letting you shine. But you should want to be shined, and to begin to interact with the desire to want to shine, because that will boost your creative capacity, and that is connecting with the divine feminine energy, and everything you create from that desire has its own life and will live its own life and will exist in its own way, and that the whole process is worshipful and worthy of veneration. And so not to be diminutive, not to look at sex like, it's something that isn't anything. Not to devalue things related to, not to devalue what you create related to its position in a system of dominance, but rather to want to be desired, to want to make things that will be appreciated by others, and to want to get the credit for that, is that's taking the power, holding the power, and creating from the power. Because when we create from a disempowered place, we create from an unbalanced place, and our creations are then lacking to a certain degree. That doesn't mean that your kids are lacking. They're not. They're brilliant. But it means that, like, and when I say that, I really want to, drive home this idea that we're working with symbols and concepts. And so to not consider that, that the system that we've all been creating through, and the creations that we've created, aren't necessarily less than, but that there's something really important about us stepping back into our power of wanting to be gorgeous, sexy, and glowing, and strutting our stuff. Because when you take the competition out of that, it's basically just being in your confident, beautiful self, and all the attention that you get as a result of it, you're meant to get because you are worthy. And end of story. You are worthy, and step into that I am worthy, and reconnect to the desire to be desired, because there's nothing wrong with that. You have it's a motivator for a reason. When you have a crush on someone, you are so motivated to be your best self. That's tapping back into that desire to be desired, which is very healthy. When you decide that you shouldn't want to be desired because it's somehow evil to attract men or attract women, that whole philosophy around women's sensuality and sexuality being dangerous, it's not. Lilith's label as the succubus is really demonizing female sexuality from that place of power, and creating from that place of power by making it look like for a woman to be sexual is to dominate men, when nothing could be farther from the truth. In fact, she's saying, we all sort of have to work our way out of the controls that are in place. This is that Eight of Swords. The way that we get out of these systems of oppression is to value different things, and to above anything else, to put a value around the power of stepping into our divine feminine energy, and desiring to be desired, and creating from the power of holding desire. That's just really, really important, and that we do this no matter what gender we are. That we allow for that spaciousness, and we allow for that internal growth, and we allow a desire to function as the desire tells us where to go, and it motivates us, and it gives us a lot that we need, and to not take that out of the equation. This is such a hard message to bring through. Holy crap. Because fighting back is taking a new path with all of this. It's taking a new path of creation and creating. And I don't know how much farther, I'm going to take a deep breath. We are at 23 minutes. I guess I'm going to break this up into another round. But yeah, this was a convoluted part of the message to push through, but it's basically saying Lilith is really, really urging you, wherever that internal fire of your desirability has gone out, to put the fire back on again, because you need it to create. and that your magic and your creativity are fused together. And so when you start to work with your magic, there's a part of you that needs to want that with which you create to be desired by the world that you're creating it for. And so you have to do away with everything that says you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you have no right to be loud, you have no right to shine. If you shine, then it puts a shadow on someone else. That's the Eve wound. You know, and so we want to break those rules and start to shine. And when there's you know, this idea of comparison and competition comes in, that's just a system of dominance and oppression that we just have to ignore as we create from this place of wanting to be appreciated, wanting to be desired, wanting to be loved, and wanting to be valued for what we bring forth from holding power and creating from it. So I'm going to end this episode here, and we're going to go into the next episode in just a second, but I kind of want to just check in with everybody. This is a hard message for me to deliver. It's like pulling teeth. So I don't know how easy it is to receive or how, you know, much it makes sense. Often when I do a series that confronts belief systems like the way that this one is, like I do lose a lot of followers. I'm fine with it. Like don't follow me if you don't want to go into the deep end, because, you know, I'm teaching how to swim. But I do want everybody to, because this is a lot of dense stuff and some of it makes sense, and I encourage people to have questions in the comment sections, because this series is figuring out with Lisa Lee, which means that I don't have it all figured out, and I'm not speaking from some, you know, position of authority that says everything out of my mouth is the truth. You know, I really do want us to interact with it like I'm channeling the divine, and these are the stories that they're bringing the information through, and we're allowing for them to speak, and we're listening for the purposes of having positive change in our life. But I want us to use the comment section, and I encourage you to comment, because I want to create a level of community around, you know, what it means to figure this stuff out together. I'm not a guru. I will never be a guru. I will always be a mess. And you know, by that, I'm not like talking down to myself. I just really want us to know that information that you get and you have ideas and thoughts, you have as much of a platform to teach from that comment section as I do. And I encourage you to speak about what it is that you are thinking about getting from this, you know, questions that come up in the comment section. I will try to answer in, you know, figuring out with Lisa Lee, because that's what this series is all about. And even though comments, you know, boost whatever views, like that's really not my goal. If you've been following me for a long time, and I've been at this for a couple of years now, then you know that I actually don't put too much stock into that. So I'm inviting you to comment, to connect with each other. I'm inviting you to comment because I know that thinking and thoughts that you have as these messages come through are really valuable, even to me, for me to learn from you. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else before I keep going. Yeah, figuring out with Lisa Lee means we don't have it all figured out. So I invite you into the process of discourse in the comments section, so that we can all continue to figure it out together. And certainly if there are questions that come up or things that don't sit right with you, that's okay, because we're learning together. And so I encourage you to participate. And with that, let's go into the next episode.